All right. Well, when a man-made catastrophe happens, let's say something like Chernobyl or Fukushima or even the Challenger disaster, it's often we look to either the overly simplistic explanation to assign blame, something like, well, they should have seen it coming. What does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
To the complex explanation where there's a lot of hand waving and whiteboards and equations and people drawing on the whiteboards trying to explain what happened. But while both of those are both the simplistic and the complex explanations they may have some merit, the root cause of man-made catastrophes may be something really as mundane as attitude. The breakdowns in simple habits and daily routines, the basics like humility and integrity and communication and positivity. Our first guest today is Dr. Randall Bell, author of Me, We, Do, Be, The Four Cornerstones of Success. He has consulted on many national and personal tragedies, including the attack on the World Trade Center, the Flight 93 crash, the BP oil spill, as well as the John Benet Ramsey and O.J. Simpson cases. And his take on root causes of some catastrophes might surprise you a little bit. Dr. Bell, thanks for joining us this morning.
Dirk and Mike, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Hey, well, as we have just heard from your bio, this is pretty interesting. I didn't know there was a job category for this. You have been, or still, I'm assuming, a consultant to disasters. And why are you called in exactly?
Well, I'm called in primarily as an economist. I calculate the damages. So when you hear on TV that the damages were X million or X billion dollars, I'm the guy with the calculator computing those damages. But I learned a long time ago that there are actual people behind the headlines. And so I actually went back to school and studied sociology to understand the interrelationship between the sociology and the economics of the disasters.
Well, Dr. Bell, your title of your book is Me, We, Do, Be, and maybe you can walk us through and explain the title a little bit for us.
Sure. I'm going to use a little reference point here. Me is our mindset. That's everything we're thinking philosophically. It's everything that we believe philosophically. It's everything we feel spiritually. That's me. We is our relationships, our connections with other people, whether they're healthy or whether they're toxic. That has a big role to play in our success, our level of success. Do is productivity. In economics, we call that land, labor, and capital. But what we're really talking about is taking care of our money, taking care of our health, taking care of our homes and businesses. That's do. And then B is a game plan for the future. It's basically our legacy, our setting our goals, time management, those types of things.
Now, in your book, you have a quote that I kind of picked up on. You write, quote, "Like the cornerstones of a building, there are basic foundational elements we must maintain to continue operating on a high level. These basic elements can be summed up as humility, integrity, communication, positivity, and productivity." So is it true to say that man-made, or let's call them avoidable catastrophes, can be boiled down to a lack of some combination of those basic elements?
Yes, you can always, at least I've been to more disaster sites than anybody, I think, in world history, 7 continents worth of, and 50 states worth of disaster sites. And I'm not trying to oversimplify things, but it can be said that ultimately I can identify the me or the we or the do or the be cornerstone that was missing. You need all 4. And if you have all 4, you have a solid foundation. With a solid foundation, you can build anything you want, or you can recover from disasters as well with a solid foundation. But ultimately, you can connect the disaster to a fault in one of those 4 areas.
And can you give maybe an example, a simple example that some of us might be familiar with, where you could tie it back to something like that?
Sure. I really started making a big connection between all of this when I was in Chernobyl. I had a letter of invitation from the head of Chernobyl. I went out down a country road to the guard post where they guard Chernobyl. It's highly radioactive. And I went into this kind of military post. I immediately noticed that all the Soviet guards there had machine guns over their shoulder, so I was on my best, behavior. And it was about lunchtime. They started breaking out salami sandwiches and passing it around and offering me some. And then the other guy started breaking out vodka. And, I'm not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, but vodka and machine guns literally in both hands was kind of a cultural problem. And I thought, you know what, the light bulb went off, and I said, it's not a coincidence that the world's biggest nuclear accident occurred in a culture where this was okay, to literally have a machine gun in one hand and a bottle of vodka in another. And that's where I started the whole experiment of studying the sociology behind all these things.
That's a great story.
That would be a little scary.
Yeah.
Well, when you've consulted on disasters involving companies, were CEOs surprised that it was their shortcomings on these, let's face it, basic elements that may have caused the problem? I mean, were they expecting you to come up with something maybe more complex?
Well, a lot of people think that complex problems, require a complex answer, and that's not always true. Sometimes the answers are pretty simple. And with the CEOs and others that I deal with, it depends on the CEO. Some take responsibility, and they have a heart, and they want to make right whatever problem was caused as a result of their organization. Some are very, in a very defensive posture. You go from person to person to kind of figure that one out. But ultimately, I think the most intelligent way to go about it is to really assess your me, your mindset, your we, your relationships, productivity, and your game plan for the future, and really see what's solid, what needs some help, and then go to work to build that to get your organization back on track.
And Randall, I think this falls into the me part of this, because I think there's maybe what Dirk was referring to there with maybe the big bosses at some of these companies, CEOs, there's a lot of ego involved, right? I mean, so the idea that some of these solutions might be relatively simple, is that always easily accepted by CEOs?
Not always easily accepted, but again, some of these people are very egotistical, and there's strategies to deal with that, and others are very down to earth. I just had lunch yesterday with Mrs. Fender, whose husband Leo Fender started Fender. He didn't have a problem with ego at all. He took responsibility for everything. He lived actually in a mobile home. His passion was making great musical instruments. So there's an example of a CEO that built an iconic empire without ego. And yet we see a lot in today's society. We see too much ego, and I think you're right. That becomes a big problem.
Okay, well, Dr. Randall Bell, author of Me, We, Do, Be, The Four Cornerstones of Success. Thanks for joining us this morning. If you want to get a copy of Dr. Bell's book, there is a link underneath the player page that will link out to, I believe it links out to Amazon, and you can take a look at his book down there. Dr. Bell, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Mike, and thanks, Dirk. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no sweat. Take care.
Thanks, Randall. Good seeing you.